Hey all, Josh here, and this is my review of Lost Planet 2. It's a popular game series sequel and by Capcom, and does it live up to the original? Frankly, I don't know. I never actually got around to playing the original, so taking this review in that perspective, let's get started. The story, or what afterthought of it is basically about EDN-3, the planet that you were playing on in the first game, which is primarily a snowy planet, but now has large patches of jungle terrain sprouting up in the middle of it, or particular desert terrain as well, different kinds of more humid terrain, I guess I should say, because of large, humongous bugs, to say the least. And the story is pretty much that. You go around, you shoot bugs, that's about it. Technically, there's some conspiracy plot about snow pirates and the government and just all this other periphery crap, but really it doesn't matter. The story is very poor in this. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, I think. This game is primarily meant for the multiplayer, and I'm taking it in that perspective. So the game gets a free pass on the story in this case. For what it is, though, it was a little better than I expected. There was no characters developed, but at the same time, it did have the same amount of action bravado that you would expect to carry you along a campaign of this size. One thing I do have to complain about is that the ending was terrible. Even from this perspective, the final boss takes about an hour to complete. It's absolutely tedious, and there's twists for no good reason. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, frankly, in general. And it pulled a Jurassic Park right at the end, and if you've played the game, you probably know what I mean. If not, well, then you don't care. So, let's get on to the gameplay, though. That's the main portion of the game. This is a shooting game, a third-person shooting game, and a pretty good one at that, I must say. I don't quite understand why there is such low reviews for this game. I guess I can understand specific bits of it, but overall I would rate this game positively. Perhaps it's just a matter of opinion. I do want to say, though, that this is very much a game of divided enjoyment. There are parts that are absolutely fantastic. There's one mission you're launched out of a space shuttle and have to fly back down to the space shuttle and take out enemies, recapture the shuttle. It's very, very cool, and there's a lot of segments like that throughout the game where you're just like, wow, I feel like a badass. And this is a really cool segment. But then they have the other segments, the other half of the coin. And these segments are absolutely god-awful. They'll be too difficult, there'll be not enough checkpoints in the level, the enemies will be so goddamn cheap, and it just doesn't make it fun at all. Particularly, the campaign is almost unplayable without other people, again, going back to its multiplayer goal. At the same time, though, if you're going to call it a campaign, you might want to make it possible, or at least adjust the difficulty for one person, rather than just throw the same amount of enemies and expect the person to cope. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, much like the story, that to have the campaign really impossible for one player. Granted, you can do it, like I did for some portions, because games are actually surprisingly hard to find. And particularly, there's this one glitch where if you are on mission Episode 2, or Mission 2, Episode 1, or same difference, either way, and the other person is on Episode 2, Mission 1, and they have a game set up for that, you can't join that game. You know why? Because you can't play something you've already beat. But that doesn't make any fucking sense, now does it? Because if you haven't beat it, if you can't play it, you can't beat it, now can you? So you either have to find a game before that, and usually suffer through a few tedious rounds of going through previous missions before getting to that, and hope the person either doesn't disconnect or stop there, or do it yourself and hope for the best to find someone afterwards. You really need either dedicated friends, or just a lot of luck and expect to play a lot on your own. And unfortunately, too, this is the only way to really gain credits for the game's slot machine, which is its unlocking system, and which I have another thing to say about, but I'll get to that in a second. But even this campaign, like I said, it's just really flawed. I really don't know where I was going with the last point, but I'm just really frustrated with certain parts of it, really disappointed in a lot of it, but at the same time, the core gameplay is definitely there. There are a lot of sequences that do show quite a bit of greatness to it, and overall, it's okay. Now, I may have said a lot of gripes about this game, but what about this game's main function, the multiplayer? Let's actually skip right to the online challenges. There are the regular assortment of modes, deathmatch, team deathmatch, the equivalent of capture the flag, or data post battle in this game. And there's only one that really stands out called Fugitive Mode, where a small number of players, 1 to 4, I guess, but usually 1 to 3, have to hide on a map until time runs out from all of the other players who are hunting them. And this is actually a lot more fun than it sounds because it's very tense. Often hiding places, or finding good hiding places, requires you to seek out specific portions of the map that you never knew existed before, small nooks and crannies that you wouldn't think someone's going to look. On the smaller maps, it can be a little unbalanced and sometimes impossible, but otherwise, it's actually a really fun mode. And like I said, there are a few glitches with it. The fugitives can technically win if they get a certain number of kills on the hunters, even though they only have handguns and plasma grenades. But given the right combination, you can actually do it right off the bat if you're lucky. Just run over the hunter's base, throw a few plasma grenades so they can't move and they're stunned constantly, and you pretty much win right off the bat sometimes. But for the most part, it is quite good. The only other complaint I have is, like I said, it's not balanced for anything. This game just seems poorly balanced overall, and again, it shows through in this mode, because there's one level called Thunderpeel Precipice, which takes place on a dark, stormy, beach-like area, which really, really sucks for the hunters in this mode, because the fugitives can literally hang off the side of the seawall and under the water, and you basically can't get to them. And if you do find them, lucky if you find them again, because frankly that area is so enormous that it's next to impossible if the fugitive is good, even half decent. Otherwise, though, like I said, it is a really fun mode. I realize I'm ragging on this game a lot, but I want you to get across this is a fun game regardless. It's quite addictive. I keep playing it, so it can't be that terrible. But there is just a lot of flaws in this game. It's not a perfect game, but it is still a lot of fun. That's how I said I don't understand the reviews in this one, because overall, the core mechanics still do work. It's a third-person shooting. The shooting works really well outside of a terrible flinching mechanic, and the grappling hook adds a lot to this game. Really, really does. You can grapple onto mostly any surface, and either hang from a surface, you can just hold on to it, and like stand above doors and whatnot. It really adds a unique dimension to the game that I really haven't seen in something other than perhaps 007 Agent Under Fire, and though it's not as ridiculous as it was in that game, it does add a really unique dimension to the battles, and strategic placing of your character and your team can really turn the tide of a battle. It's quite interesting, and makes some of the maps really, really fun, and better than they even are sometimes. Lastly, the controls, like I said, it's a little complicated, much like everything else. It's a little unbalanced. There's way too many buttons to hold at times, and some of the controls to multitask on them, you need to be quite the octopus, but they are manageable. You just need to get to know them. They're not absolutely abominable. They're just flawed. Lastly, the sound, I think, is probably the best part about this game. Outside of the visuals, which are quite amazing, I forgot to add. The graphics do lend a really great atmosphere to the campaign, and are very detailed, very realistic looking, despite the obviously unrealistic foes that you're fighting, and really give you a sense of scale with the huge boss battles in the campaign, which are really one of the highlights of the campaign outside of the final boss, because they fill the screen 3 times over, and you're just kind of standing there dwarfed in there by their significance. It's really quite cool. Anyway, lastly, like I said, the sound in this game really is majestic score in this, really gets your blood pumping. The only problem is, because you're going to fail so many times on the missions, get ready to hear them quite a few times. Also, for those that are driven insane by like I am, if you press R1 on the main menu, you can change the menu music, so you don't have to listen to that inane drivel over and over and over again. So, in conclusion, I do think that Lost Planet 2 is a great game. It is a flawed one, but overall, there's a lot of fun to be had here. Don't be put off by the reviews. Go check out the 2 demos available. There's a demo for both the campaign and the multiplayer online. Whether either will be populated at this moment, I don't know. But check them out regardless. See if you like it. I personally do. I don't regret spending my money on it. Now, I